serving as the primary liaison with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Prior to serving the governor's office, Commissioner Ginecco worked for TCEQ as a section manager in the Radioactive Materials Division. So don't get too close to the commissioner. Ginecco served as a legislative staffer for both Texas State Representatives Morrison and Lewis, and as a legislative analyst at the Comptroller of Public Office. He was also a public school teacher in New Orleans, which I thought was kind of interesting. Commissioner Ginecco will be presenting the Binational Air Quality Monitoring Fund in the Paseo del Norte region, which is El Paso, Juarez, and Las Cruces. So with that, Commissioner, thank you for joining us this morning, and come on up, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you all today and to speak to you in person as well as virtually for those of you who are able to watch from further afield. I am Bobby Ginecco, Commissioner for the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. We're the state agency for the environment here in Texas. Our mission is clean air, clean water, and the safe management of waste consistent with sustainable economic development. Since Texas shares the longest stretch of the border of any state, we're proud to offer a unique program called the Border Initiative to provide additional outreach and environmental services to the communities, companies, and municipalities on and near the border in Texas. We also collaborate with our neighboring states and municipalities in Mexico to coordinate emergency response and collaborate on special projects. We do this because we recognize the importance of collaboration and building relationships with our neighbors in Mexico to protect our shared environment in the border region. One project I'm especially excited to share with you this morning is the Binational Fund for Air Quality Monitoring, which we have been working on with the North American Development Bank, the Department of Ecology of Ciudad Juarez, the Secretariat for Urban Development and Ecology in Chihuahua, Semonat, New Mexico Environment Department, and other partners for several years. It all started with the Border 2025 program that Ambassador Moctezuma mentioned yesterday, and the 1983 La Paz Agreement, which launched many collaborative efforts between the states and local governments in Texas, Chihuahua, and New Mexico to protect our shared air quality. The air quality in El Paso, Ciudad Juarez, and Dona Ana County, New Mexico is a shared environmental resource. It is literally one air basin, and we all breathe the same air. And so for decades, the public and private sectors in the region have recognized the need for binational efforts to address air quality, and specifically air quality monitoring. We simply cannot make science-based decisions and take emission control measures without reliable air quality data. The primary institution for this has been a multi-state public-private organization called the Joint Advisory Committee for the Improvement of Air Quality, which was created under Annex 5 of the 1983 La Paz Agreement. Members of that Joint Advisory Committee, I call it JAC, have for decades wanted to develop a financing mechanism to fund binational air quality monitoring. We met with the North American Development Bank and together came up with a solution that I'm excited to share with you today. The Binational Air Quality Monitoring Fund is essentially a bank account held at the bank that can receive contributions from governments, foundations, and private business on both sides of the border. The money in the fund can only be used to support air quality monitoring stations in Ciudad Juarez to generate the data that members of the public, governments, and academia need to protect public health and ensure sustainable economic development. The decisions governing the fund are to be made by two technical commissions newly created within the Joint Advisory Committee. This means that all the key government stakeholders are present in the decision-making process, from the local level, Juarez and El Paso, to the states, Chihuahua, New Mexico, and Texas, and the federal stakeholders, EPA and Semonat. Representatives of all jurisdictions come together through the Joint Advisory Committee and two new technical commissions, and they decide by consensus what air quality monitoring investments to make through the fund. The bank then takes their direction and spends the funds accordingly. In the coming weeks, the fund is expected to support a new contract for operations and maintenance of 3 air quality monitoring stations in Juarez. We know that this data will be of the highest quality and it will be of value to residents on both sides of the border. We think the Binational Fund for Air Quality Monitoring could be a model for financing other fundamental environmental services, such as water quality monitoring, research, planning, and resource management. Essentially, this is a mechanism that gives the decision-making authority to the local communities and government stakeholders while allowing private and public dollars and pesos to come in and be managed through a trusted binational institution. And we think there is no better partner than the NADB to play that role of holding these funds and dispersing them according to the guidance from the Joint Advisory Committee members. I want to especially thank Salvador Lopez, Fernando Ortiz, and Daniel Hobbs at the NADB for their work to help establish the Binational Fund. I want to encourage all of you to visit the JAC, the Joint Advisory Committee website, cccjac.org, to learn more and consider contributing to the fund to support better air quality in the Paseo del Norte. Thank you, and I'd love to take any questions.
Commissioner, we got a question from the online audience asking, can industry or foundations contribute to the Binational Fund? And is it limited to U.S. or Mexican-based organizations? And what is their incentive to contribute?
I appreciate the question, thank you. And it's a bit of a dodge right out of the gate. Part of the beauty of placing direct operational decision-making and control of this fund is that I'd want to confirm the answers to those questions with y'all, but my understanding is there shouldn't be any restrictions based on geography and individual stakeholders, and I think the implicit, if someone further abroad wants to support this project and this effort, yes, please, absolutely, and we would very much love to make sure that can happen and find ways to allow it to happen. As for the third part of that question, what are the incentives? I'll start furthest out and work backwards. I think for someone far across the globe looking at the Binational Air Fund, wondering what's my incentive to support, you're helping further science, you're helping further protection of public health, a better understanding of air quality in the Paseo del Norte, which is a really unique airshed with very distinct topographical features that really frustrate our role as an agency to understand with the certainty that we need to in interfacing with our federal government and our interstate partners and communicating with a very real stakeholder, but one over a legal obstacle, and that's the Mexican states and Sierra Juarez in particular. I think there is so it's a really nutty, thorny political, governmental problem, but also a scientific one layered on top. So I think that someone halfway around the world, hopefully the altruism of their heart would be enough to want to help further science and further the understanding of the basin. But more importantly, this is a very exciting model for solving hard problems that span political boundaries all across the world. And I think stakeholders with a stake in their local fights would want to see us succeed here in Paseo del Norte just as much as they would want to see in their individual sites. So as an example, as a call to solving problems collaboratively in very difficult policy spaces, I would encourage and ask everyone to consider supporting this effort and in turn helping us understand where you have problems elsewhere across the world and help bring our community and stakeholders to understand and become aware of where this model could be used elsewhere. It's a really thorny problem and one that's frustrated us over the years, where federal dollars coming through our state or perhaps state dollars directly would get pointed at the problem of better understanding air quality outside of our nation or state's boundaries. How do we send supplies, material, resources, invitations to change monitoring or bring in new interventions? It's a really difficult problem, but one that I'm really pleased to see that we're solving with a longer recipe for success, that I would really be excited to see this succeed here so that we could apply this model more broadly across the Mexico-U.S. border, certainly, but I think it's got value anywhere in the world. And then for the stakeholders closer afield, there's immediate value in better understanding and really knowing where the actual impediments to air quality in that captive air basin where those reside. I just last week in a conversation with EPA Acting Regional Administrator for Region 6, I tried to describe this problem that we're working in and wrestling in, and I see the Paso del Norte as a bit of a orchard, a big fruit orchard, and there's some fences across the orchard that divides it up and makes it harder for us to get to other parts of the orchard, and we all continue to work and look at our parts of the fruit orchard and pull off all the low-hanging fruit that we can, where we look at the path forward. It's far better to look across the fence and to share the information and say, there's some low-hanging fruit on your side of the fence as well. What we've done over here has worked well for us. So rather than bringing in higher ladders and continuing to go higher up on our fruit trees on our side of the fence, I think the Binational Air Fund specifically puts us in a posture of better working with our partners in Mexico, our partners in New Mexico, and helping look at each other's fruit trees in this orchard and say, hey, let's move some of the ladders that we have out here to get some of the low-hanging fruit that we can immediately tackle. That gets more fruit on the ground for all of us. And it's not a great metaphor. I'm continuing to work on it, but I think that it shows the struggle that I have in trying to make sound as exciting as possible what is, my wife tells me, a very, very boring and very unexciting government problem, but it's something that we work in spaces that we care intensely about. So I'm really grateful for the North American Development Bank for being a partner with us in this venture. It's a new attempt at solving a timeless problem we've all tried to solve before. So hopefully we can continue to move forward and get more people willing to step in with us.
Any other questions for the commissioner? Going once, going twice. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you all.
Good morning again. If I may invite the panelists for the water module to get prepared, please. I would appreciate that. We come to the last session of the conference. On behalf of bank management and staff, we appreciate you for staying with us, both in person and in line. The last module today, it's about water and the challenge of climate change when it comes to water resources. As many of you know, water has been at the core of NADBANC's work for the last 25 years. It continues to be our #1 priority. And as such, in our existence, out of the 281 projects that we finance, 163, that's about 60% of the projects, have been in the water and wastewater sector. These projects have benefited about 18 million people. And then just to give you some numbers, thanks to these projects, we have helped develop 163 million gallons per day of drinking water, improve our new capacity, as well as 370 million gallons per day of wastewater treatment capacity. And if you look at how this translates into service, I think we see pretty impressive numbers. And we see the service coverage of water and wastewater in Mexican cities in particularly reaching 97%. So we have almost universal cover. But that's obviously not to say that we don't have challenges. We have challenges with existing infrastructure aging, the operation and maintenance of infrastructure. But furthermore, we have a series of newer or emerging topics that the panel will address today as it relates to climate change and water supply sources. I'm going to introduce our moderator, Mr. Paul Brown. Good friend of mine. Paul Brown is a certified planner, author, and frequent speaker on integrated planning, program management, and stakeholder engagement for public utilities and environmental agencies. Post-client include the states of California and Colorado, the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, the Santa Clara Valley Water District, the Orange County Sanitation District, the Orange County Water District, the West Basin Municipal Water District, and many others in California. He has served on the International Advisory Panel for the Institute of Water Policy at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy in Singapore, as well as the Stockholm Industry Water Committee. He has just released a new book entitled Too Good to Be True, The Scottsdale and Privatization in the 1980s. He's co-author of the book Cities of the Future Towards Integrating Sustainable Water and Landscape Management, and as well as a couple other books that I will mention. From 2003 through 2014, Paul was a visiting professor and director of applied research at the University of South Florida, and he was the lecturer of the 8th Annual Distinguished Lecturer Series in Sustainable Development in Cambridge University in 2007. With that, Paul, I'll pass it on to you to moderate the panel. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd forgotten so many of those things I did. It's great to be here at this last panel, tackling a topic that is, I think, one of the most difficult from the standpoint of maybe changing some of our thinking about what climate change means to all of us who work in water. I just want to ask, can I get some audience participation and just ask how many of you have experienced this sort of feeling of a little bit of surprise that some extreme events have been a little more extreme than you imagined they might have been, even though you knew climate change was on its way? I'll put my hand up. I found myself surprised several times, and I always feel like I should know better. I should know better. This is what we've been expecting. And so what I want to do is set up for the panelists a discussion, and we're going to lead off with Avner Adden, who is probably one of the world's most visionary thinkers relative to a holistic view of the water cycle and how we can have a closed loop system within which we can make the most of the water resources we have. And then we're going to move on to some questions that I'll share with you with Oscar Ibanez, who is the executive director of the Central Water and Sanitation Board of the state of Chihuahua, a college professor himself, and we're happy to have Donovan Burton, who's a vice president, water resources and government relations, San Antonio Water System, SAWS, as we like to call it. And he was formerly the SAWS chief of staff and has been on the this I think is really relevant. The Texas Legislative Committee Director over military and homeland security issues. And the reason I think this is relevant is because some of the climate change impacts we're facing really turn into homeland security issues. And so what I wanted to start with, I was hoping to just start myself because I was allowed to consider myself a panelist. I don't have anything more to say about what I've done in my career. You've heard more than enough. But I do want to just say that there was a point at which I was really, as a planner, professional planner, sort of taken aback by an article that appeared in 2008, and it said that the headline of the article was "Stationarity is Dead. Wither Water Management." I thought, well, stationarity is dead. Well, what is stationarity? And then I looked that up, and it's that concept that if we've got 100 years of data in a stationary system, we can get a pretty good idea of the envelope within which that data is going to stay constantly within this envelope, maybe very volatile, but we know what the boundaries are, and we can look at the averages over time, and that's meaningful. But this, and I had been relying on that data since the 90s to do planning for Southern California. We were so proud of the 80 plus years of hydrology that we were able to use in models to understand how all of our decisions were going to get made. They said, we assert that stationarity is dead and should no longer serve as a central default assumption in water resource risk assessment and planning. Finding a suitable successor is crucial for human adaptation to climate change. Finding a suitable successor? Actually, this particular article, which appeared in Science, was followed by a whole lot of letters saying, yeah, that's great to throw that out there, but do you have any ideas what the suitable successor would be? And they actually wrote a follow-up article that said, don't stop doing what you're doing, but recognize that there's something else going on here that you better take account of. So that was the first time I really started to think, I better think about how I'm functioning as a planner, because people are really relying, all of you in here are working with decision makers who probably think that the recommendations you're making can be believed. And we're applying rational tools based on historic data that may not be any good for predicting the future relative to hydrology. We can predict the future about a lot of things, but it's getting much more difficult to do it with respect to hydrology. So that's that first circle up top there. The gap between what we can predict and what's actually going to happen. That's there right now. I'm working, so there's ways to deal with this, of course, and you know them too. We can do scenario planning. And, but anyone who's attempted this with the Metropolitan Board is like 36 directors. And so talk about scenario planning with 36 directors. And the first thing you get is, well, how are we going to pick the scenario we want? Well, that's not what we're not picking a scenario. We're trying to figure out how our decisions would function in these different scenarios. We're not going to pick one. I mean, I'd pick the really good one if I could pick one. So there's a kind of mindset change here. So you can get way into this. When are we going to have the base? I know now we are modeling different portfolios of investments and policies and infrastructure. We're modeling it inside these different scenarios just to see the sort of range of, how bad is bad, plausibly bad. And then the question you get is, well, when are we going to get the forecast? I mean, what are we supposed to do with all of these different scenarios and your different expectations under these conditions? And suddenly you realize you're in a world where this idea that we don't know things actually is so uncomfortable for policymakers that you're almost forced to pretend you know something. And trying to keep a focus on that top box is a hard thing. The second thing that is really related to the top box is that this pace of extreme events is picking up, and durations are the duration of events. I hadn't really thought about how significant that was until Hurricane Harvey. You can take a pretty normal hurricane, but if it just sits on top of you for 6 consecutive days, you've got a problem no matter what. 8 trillion gallons of water is a lot of water to fall on any city. And while many people will be critical of Houston for not having the most progressive planning processes in the world, I don't think that there's any best practice that could handle 4 cubic miles of water dropping on them in 6 days. That's just an unexpected event. And then the third, so, you know, we don't know how to predict, and we certainly are being surprised at how extreme the extremes can be, how long the durations can be, how frequent. It's pretty, you know, when you talk about Harvey and say it's a 1,000-year event, what the heck are you basing that on? It'd give you the impression that we're good now. We can wait 1,000 years before we'll ever see something like this again. Is that the message we want to send? We don't know how often that's going to happen. But I bet it isn't 1,000 years. So there's deep uncertainty, compounding extremes. This is another aspect of this that I didn't realize till there was a situation in Montecito, California. I don't know if you know about the Montecito mudslide. There had been in December of 2017 a wildfire in the San Padres Mountains. Burned a huge perimeter. The perimeter was huge. It's about the size of Singapore because I was at a presentation in Singapore and it fit so perfectly that the perimeter of this fire was about the size of Singapore. It was the largest wildfire in California history and held that record for less than a year. Now it's like the 5th largest, and it's falling fast. It won't even be remembered. It'll be so small in the history of wildfires in California. So that happened in December. Then, in January of 2018, there was a rain event that had a little microburst in it where 1/2 inch of rain fell in 5 minutes. 1/2 inch of rain in 5 minutes. That mobilized every boulder, every tree, everything that wasn't nailed down, and even that wouldn't have stopped it. And it all cascaded down into the residential community of Montecito and across Route 101 and blocked the whole highway. The boulders were the size of trucks. There was a newspaper article on it. A newspaper article on it that I couldn't get out of my mind, because this was the battalion chief who had gotten maps. Already had these maps about what the 100-year and 500-year flood plain was, and determined that this event did not warrant anybody evacuating their homes. Totally voluntary. Now, in that fire I mentioned, that was a mandatory evacuation, and no lives were lost. In this particular incident, 23 people died in their homes, most of them literally crushed by boulders the size of trucks. And he said that actually the model was good. It had followed the floodplain. He said, we were expecting it, even expecting the worst and planning for the worst. No one expected this. And so this is this additional factor that I'd not thought of. It's not just one climate event we're going to have to deal with. We're going to have to deal with multiple extremes at once. And they create interactions that are just not predictable. And then to further compound this issue, as Arva will tell us, we're integrating all of our infrastructure. I mean, it's in the water world. I'm working on a regional recycled water program for the Metropolitan Water District that is working together with the Los Angeles County sanitation districts for a 150 million gallon per day recycled water plant to recharge groundwater basins and ultimately, potentially, direct potable reuse. We are all concerned about the connections between all of these systems. We've got a wastewater system connected to a water system, connected to a groundwater basin, connected to flood control facilities and recharge basins. And the number of agencies involved in making this system of systems work is enormous, and nobody's in charge of the system of systems. Everyone's in charge of their own system, and they have contracts. You know, I promised to do this, you promised to do that. And I can remember a meeting where we were talking about these issues, and the sanitation district manager said, Paul, you have to understand, we're a wastewater agency. We have permits to meet. We don't make drinking water. Well, okay, if things get bad, is that what we're going to fall back on? I mean, I may have my contract that says you've got a requirement to give me water of this quality, but am I going to get it? Or is the ocean going to get what it deserves because of the permit that they have to operate under? And suddenly you see that the system of systems is very vulnerable to any kind of anomaly in any one of the systems. They propagate, they can sometimes amplify across the whole system. You might remember an event something like that occurred here this past winter. So you put these, you combine all of this, and in the center, you can anticipate sort of cascading failures, no matter how well the individual components have been engineered. This is what I want. We can engineer all of these systems based on assumptions about what are the inputs, what are the outputs. But these assumptions, all externalities, may prove to be very far off base. And if that's the case, you can be confident that you will run into a situation where your engineered component is not getting what it's expected to get or delivering what it expected to deliver. Therein is the framework within which I'd like to talk about these issues with our panelists. Thank you for your forbearance on letting me sort of set up this problem. But I want to start with the system of systems question, because nobody has thought more about this system of systems and these issues than our first panelist. And I'm going to just, well, we saw that. I mean, that we don't need. I'm going the wrong way. So I'm going to ask these three questions. Where are the most severe climate-driven vulnerabilities in these highly integrated systems? But we need to understand, we need to do both. We need to understand how they work and then talk about where might they be vulnerable. Then the second question I'd like to get to is, what have we learned from the events of last year's event, Hurricane Harvey, other events? What have you learned as a result of living through these experiences? I liked what happened after Superstorm Sandy, because there was a real commitment to, let's not build back what failed. Let's be really creative about building back something different that might have survived better in those circumstances. And then the third question is, how can we reduce the damage from these compounding system failures through collaboration across the border? And how can we minimize the recovery time, the bounce back time? Because to me, that's the definition of resilience. Resilience is, can we bounce back? Can communities bounce back? I mean, we can replace pumps and valves and membranes and everything else, but it's communities that are affected by these events. And one, minimizing the damage from failure, which is, I hope, something engineers are all thinking about now. Like, it's not going to break. This is a reliable system. Well, okay, let's pretend it does. What are the consequences? And how long will it take to bring it back to life? And so let's start.
All right.
You've heard enough, right?
You said it all. I mean, all right.
Well, I wasn't trying to do that. But so, can you? I'm going to put your first question up, and
you can leave that there. Now, before I talk about it, I really must thank. I must give a big thank to the NADB management, Callisto and Jesse and the staff, and particularly to Gonzalo, who was really the initiator of my coming, and his wife Flora, that is sitting with us here, helped us so much too. So thank you very much. Well, and thank you, Paul, for bringing it under your umbrella here. Yeah. Okay, so I regret that because I'm university professor, I'm not used just to sit in my chair and look at the slides. So if you permit me, I will go over there and talk from there.
I think he didn't present that.
I should have thought of that. Walking over there and talking from over there.
I like the steps. So actually, because I was told to have only one slide, later I succeeded in putting in another one at the end, but I put about 3 or 4 slides of the same slide, but I will try to say what I like to say. And actually, what we see here, look first, please, look on this picture here. And what we can see here is actually what I would call a holistic water cycle. And this holistic water cycle includes everything because everything is connected. Now, the natural water that we usually get is water from the surface water, like from dams and filtration plants and so forth, and groundwater. But this is not enough, and also we should conserve them for the future because we are really expecting droughts, maybe long droughts, that we have to prepare to. Therefore, and in Israel already we had to do it, we need to manufacture water. Manufacture water means taking water from the sea or from brackish water. For example, down here, down San Antonio, I just learned there is an aquifer with the same salinity as the seawater. And also, we can collect rainwater. And also, we started to do already in the United States, is less, but it's growing, is to reuse wastewater. Now, when we look at all these new resources, actually they are endless. I mean, 70% of the Earth area is water, is oceans. A lot of groundwater that we couldn't use until now. But the technology brought us to a place that we can afford to pay for reusing, using and reusing those water. The wastewater, the other types of water. So this brings me to saying that there was some change here, and it will grow between which dominates our resources, the quality or the quantity. Until recently, the quantity was the biggest problem. But today, actually, we have a lot of water, many types of water, but their quality is the obstacle. So quality probably is going to be the dominant factor in governance decisions about water use and supply. Now, if we look at this, we can look at this picture. On this left side, there are different water resources, and on the right side are the water users. But the water users themselves, they produce wastewater. And this wastewater can be treated and enter the water resources part. And then we can use it. Now, where to use it? It depends on the water quality that we want. In Israel, for example, we preferred to reuse the wastewater for agriculture. And Israel is now using 85% of the domestic wastewater is being used today for agricultural irrigation. And in other countries, it can be different. In California, they started to develop taking drinking water out of wastewater. Before even they really reused all their potential. So it's a matter of decision, of course. Now, water is being used not only for domestic, it's being used for industry. The industry itself should recycle the water as much as possible. And also nature, like in dry weather, the rivers dry, some of them, the streams dry. We can put reused water into the streams to make them revive and even to do recreation if we treat them well. So I miss my frog here. There was a frog on this. Can you click something there? Oh, here's my frog. Okay. Okay. I mean, this is life. This is real life. Okay. The rivers with the ecology, with the animals and so forth. So what we see here actually is things are connected. The water and wastewater, they are connected. And if I can give you now example of, you said vulnerabilities. This approach also, I think, is the best approach today. It also is vulnerable somehow. I mean, in environmental solutions, always you have to pay with something. There is nothing absolute. And in this case, let us take an example. I was talking about water quality. When we desalinate water, the water that comes out of the desalination is actually pure water. Clean water, but I say the water is too clean because this water that come out of the membranes, they don't have any minerals in it. Now we are used to have water with minerals that take care of our health. So if we take, for example, magnesium, they don't have any magnesium. Magnesium is very important for the body, for about 300 processes in the body, mainly to prevent cardiovascular disease. Now, this water that comes out does not have magnesium. They come to the home for drinking, it becomes wastewater. The wastewater will also not have magnesium. During the water treatment, there is no magnesium added. It goes for irrigation. The plants do not have magnesium. It's not good for the plants, but also people who eat vegetables and plants to get the magnesium, they wouldn't get it. And the soil, which depends, its stability depends on calcium and magnesium, is also ruined. And And this is something that has not yet been introduced into any water quality standards. And only in Israel, okay? Only in Israel, first country that put it in the standard. And this brings us to thinking that there is a connection between the water qualities. And if we do changes in order to be more safer with water quantities, we should think what would happen with the water quality too. So it is a change of mind, I think, and it should be done. So water quality standards or drinking water quality standards, they are separate today. There is drinking water quality standards from the sources, and there is wastewater standards. They should be unified. We started to talk about one water, and actually they should be unified together to one type of water quality standards.
I should have mentioned this in your introduction, that you are the chair of Israel's drinking water, among other things. I don't even know if I mentioned that you were professor of environmental standards at Hebrew University, environmental sciences at the Hebrew University. But this is a very, your idea here of bringing drinking water standards into conformance. Conformance is the wrong word, but just integrating the regulation of water quality is something that, at least on the U.S. side of the border, we have had virtually no success in doing. I mean, that people are enlightened to it. I mean, it's not as if people are, just battling. But the fact is, we've got wastewater discharge permits that are really separate from what we're doing on the drinking water side. And we can see in recycled water projects that the question of if something's gone wrong, what are we trying, what gives, maybe is the way, who's going to violate what? And that sounds like a horrible thing to say, but we all want to be in conformance all the time. How do you ration? Is there a priority of standard? Are some standards more important than others, or is everything just the same?
No, standards are standards. I mean, if there are standards, they are regulated. You have to be there. You have to conform with the standards. Now, you may have some way when you decide about standards, you can give time to the public, to the municipalities, to the water corporations to be adjusted to the standards, because you need to build pilot plans and you need to build new plants or to enhance put more advanced treatment, like in the wastewater. If you want to use AOP or MBRs everywhere and so forth. So there is a way to control it, and you bring me to talk also about what's written up here, because governance, financing, planning, innovation, they all should be part of this cycle. They cannot be something which is separated. And if we can relate the regulation that I said, for example, for the governance, if we talk about financing, this type of plants, desalination plants, and some big wastewater treatment plants, they need financing that quite often the public cannot do it by itself. You need the private money to get in there. Like in Israel, we have today 5 largest desalination plants in the world, and they are constructing by a financial model that is called BOT, Build, Operate, and Transfer. there is a contract. I mean, private companies, they build it and they operate it for 25 years. They have a contract, they supply the water, they sell the water to the government. After 25 years, the government can take it or can give them another licensing. In other way, we couldn't have constructed those. And it's working very, very nicely. And but about financing, there's also something very, very important, which is paying for the water. You mentioned that, and it was mentioned before, earlier today, about the difference in cultures in this type of thing. But if people do not pay for the water, it will be very, very difficult to manage the water in this situation that we are talking about, even in the near future. So this is, again, I mean, it's difficult, it's hard, but it's very important, I would say, to market the water in the right way. People will have to understand that. I will tell you a short story about this. I was the management of the largest European research project on water, about 22 million euros. We took 10 different cities around the world, and we made all kinds of projects and comparisons there. And one of them was Tel Aviv in Israel. And I went to Tel Aviv municipality and talked with the water department and also with the planning department of the city. And then I saw that in the planning book, there was industry, there was transportation, there was education. Water did not appear there, although in Israel, water is a very, very important issue. So I went to the water department and asked them, excuse me, why did you let them not having water in their planning? They said, well, the city went to the people and asked them, what do they need? They didn't say water, because when they open the tap, water comes out. Okay, so they didn't plan it. I think that there's a lot of miseducation in this respect, and this should be enhanced. Well, I don't want to talk.
I want you to talk,
Yeah.
but could I invite you to come back to the stage? Back up onto the stage. Can you join us up here?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, that would be great.
Ask me later questions, okay.
Well, let me ask the other panelists, do you have any questions for Aquifer?
Well, about questions, I'll just say that he points out a lot of good importance. I think for San Antonio, obviously San Antonio is incredibly important for the regional economy. My theme about it is that all the solutions, what are we going to do about it, I guess, and those kinds of solutions. All of the solutions that are going to be out there are going to involve more regional intercooperation. Probably more important, they're going to involve decision making. We've got a lot of really smart engineers, and no problems with engineers. We have a lot of smart lawyers who can come up with paperwork, but ultimately it will matter what the decisions are being made. In San Antonio, I think we have done a very good job of preparing for a lot of the climate change issues, but just as Paul, as you talked about, they change daily. We are certainly seeing lots of increased rainfall and prolonged periods of drought and all of that information that people hear globally. But San Antonio's approach has been less about the global warming side, the climate change side, but it's really been more about interregional conflicts. We have had a history of using a local aquifer that is a regional aquifer shared by a lot of different people. Ultimately, that created a lot of tension between the different communities, different regions, and we've had to develop other water resources. But our first key, and I think one of the keys to experiencing or to approaching climate change issues, is going to be through conservation. We see conservation not as a green feel-good kind of thing, San Antonio considers it a business model. We actually try to convince you to use less of our product. And I don't know how many business people out here, that's a tough business model to sell, but it is something that we believe in. It is financially benefit. The less water you have to pump, the fewer major treatment projects you have to do, the fewer, less miles of pipeline you have to put in place, less staff you have to do to manage these projects. And so it actually benefits you from a financial side, but it also approaches some of those climate change issues. Water recycling, I've talked a lot about recycling. We have the largest direct water recycle system here, which we use as an economic development tool. So one of the great community company here that deals with regional, international is Toyota. Toyota came here partially because of the land we had here, but also our recycled water system that they're able to use. We have Navistar truck that is able to reuse that. The Riverwalk, a lot of people don't know, the only reason the Riverwalk is in place the way it is because of our recycled water system. The other thing I would point out on recycled water, just like Abner points out, is the people down on the coast know exactly what we're doing in San Antonio because that water gets put into the river, into the San Antonio and ultimately the Guadalupe River. So what we do in San Antonio is not about San Antonio alone. We have to think broader, and we have to think about what that means from an regional and international perspective. And those solutions are going to come from that cooperation with those communities. So we have done a very good job, but I think we will continue, particularly on the conservation side, we'll continue increasing our recycled water system. We're actually working on that right now. We have a whole lot of things that we will work on. We also have aquifer storage and recovery, the other big pieces, and we talk about the pronounced additional rainfall. We have the largest groundwater-based aquifer storage and recovery, where in wet times we take water and we store it in a different aquifer so that we can pull out of it in times of drought. That system is really what resolved the regional conflict here over the other aquifer. So these kinds of solutions are critical, they're important, that's going to require more regional discussion, but really these also are going to require a whole lot of really tough decisions that we'll have to talk about from decision makers. That's really the theme of this. A lot of international cooperation, but making decisions.
Oscar, did you want to add?
Well, yeah, I have a couple of slides that I wanted to show, but before we show the slides, I should say that the climate change impacts are regional. The panel, they say, well, we're going to have the extremes that you mentioned, but they affect us regionally. And if we don't approach regions and see what are those possible effects, then we're kind of missing the whole picture. And the other thing is you were asking, what's going to happen? Who's going to be, what are the downside of the climate change? Who will be affected? I can tell you, water is the main target. No matter what, I mean, all the indicators that you have on climate change basically are, well, the level of the oceans are going to be rising in some places. Droughts are going to be more extreme in some others. Precipitation patterns will change. So everything is kind of associated, measured in terms of water. So guess what? I mean, climate change and water, it ends up being some sort of a metric for climate change, if you want to look at it this way. And once you have all these uncertainties and all the things that you showed us there, the problem here is adaptation is mandatory. But I will add, it's possible. And then we can bring, decision making. You need to figure out how do you deal with uncertainty. I found that uncertainty increases with climate change, basically because of what you said. We cannot rely on history, we cannot rely on trends. Now, uncertainty increases. But that increment works at the thresholds. So you have arid zones, guess what? look at the threshold of the arid areas, and then those will expand or contract. What are the other thresholds? You have shorelines. Guess what? You have islands. Well, those are the thresholds, the levels of water, those will change. Then, like in the desert, you have flash floods. Guess what? You're going to get more flash floods, and those are going to be more dangerous than they used to be. Well, San Antonio, obviously all the river control works that you have done, because of what? Because of floods and flooding, and that keeps changing. So thresholds, at least it's a guide to work on uncertainties. And I will use this word in Mexico. They start using the word, es una lluvia atípica. Well, guess what? Atypical events are no longer atypical. They're kind of now the constant.
Can you put the earlier presentation, Oscar slides are, and I can get you to your slide if I could get back to the, okay, so I'm going to just move you to that. Is that what you want?
Yeah,
next one?
If you can see that's graphic, probably that's not the one that I wanted to see, but that's okay. That's a satellite image of the water thickness. Over there, what you see highlighted on the blue dots, that's the Rio Grande watershed, and it's a binational watershed. And you see the lighter color means that the diminution of water from 2002 and 2021, you see the graph there, it's decreasing the amount of water, the thickness of water. What that means is snowpack, groundwater, surface water, everything water. So basically it's diminishing on that area. And look at California and Arizona and all that, the Rio Colorado. Well, same thing. Can you move to the next slide?
Sure.
You see the trend? It's pretty easy to see here. From 2002 all the way to 2020. So no jokes, guys. These are hard data. Okay, next one. Well, aquifers in the Rio Grande. You see 2015, there were 36. 2018, there were 53. And in 2020, 67 overexploited aquifers on the Rio Grande, just on the Mexican side. I didn't get the info from the U.S. side because of this cooperation you were saying, the lack of. You were showing now a map of the United States with all the problems, and somebody was asking, where's Mexico? Well, we have that problem too here, We have the Mexico map, and where's the United States? Anyway, the next one, please. Well, that's what happens during in Juarez across El Paso. You see during the months of the summertime, you see the water demand, and you see the years in how that variation is happening right now. The next one, you see that in Chihuahua. The red lines means complaints because they don't have water. And the blue lines is the days that we have some rain. And then you can see how the complaints drop after a few rains. And then obviously there's no rain, and then the complaints raise again. Well, that's one of the systems that you need to deal with. Water is connected with human behavior. People complain when they don't get water. How come? Is that social unrest? Well, basically, last year, the Army took over the dams in Chihuahua. Do you think that's a social issue? Do you think that's conflict? Well, somebody got killed after that. Well, people got the Army out of the dams. Do you think that's like a common event, a way to fix things? Well, those are the kind of things that are happening.
Did you want the last? You moved.
Yeah. This one is the one that I want to use. But first, this week, the U.S. government, the U.S. Bureau, the IBWC, everyone involved, they decided that next year, out of the Colorado River, there's going to be 5% less water. They're going to cut water into Mexico and into the southern part of the Rio Colorado. unprecedented, historic event. Well, you see, count that as probably more, it's going to be happening. But what are the actions implemented that Donovan was saying and Abner mentioned on the graph? Well, you can, in Chihuahua, we made a water state plan. In Mexico, we don't do long-term planning, okay? It's mandatory to do it by government. So 6 years is like our most long planning thing. But we kind of jump over the law, and then we decided that we're going to be planning for 20 years, so we did it, okay? And then we're using things like rainwater management just because we have like 100 and something thousand people in the Sierra, indigenous people, that they don't have access to water. I want to emphasize that they don't have access to water. Like they need to walk miles to get it and stuff like that, you know, the things that you think that happen only in other countries or planets. No, it happened in Chihuahua. So we use a system of rainwater management so we could provide some water at least 9 out of 12 months of the year. And then we start doing pressure management, smart water, smart metering, water recycling. On this approach of smart water management, with you throw technology to the problems, trying to solve it, and then we're also using the nature-based solutions. Why don't we try to recharge? Instead of with all the flooding that we have, why don't we try to keep it slow, get it infiltrated into the water? I mean, all kinds of green infrastructure, stuff like that. So we're using new technology, which is smart water management, nature-based solutions, governance, that thing that Abner was mentioning, and I think that deals pretty well and along the border. We have IBWC and we have NADB. Those two institutions are binational institutions by nature, and those are the ones that got us speaking here about these problems. Neither IBWC or NatBank had taken over the approach of doing a regional planning. They've tried before, but they haven't done it. And I'm not saying that it's not in their mandate, except that who else is going to do it if they don't do it, kind of thing. So why don't we try to expand the mandate or negotiate something on NatBank and IBWC? In the past, they have it was put on the table, and the decision was made not to do it. I think we need to move forward and try to rethink about those things now and try to enhance governance, regional and binationally. And just to leave you with a different thought of all this drama that we're presenting here is, yeah, it's regional, but it's also sectorial, I should say, the climate change impacts. How do we decide if the water, we will gonna continue treating it as a commodity or as a human right? What about that? Like, for instance, the excluded people that now we're trying to provide water for them, it's not an issue of commodity or whatever, it's an issue of human right. How to provide.
Let's just pick up on this. I want to pick up on this question. It actually relates to the last panel we saw. But I find that if you ask people, well, what if you were in an emergency, which has occurred? I want you to talk about this, Donovan, before we're done. But what if you're in an emergency and people really don't have any water? Do we find them water? How would you behave? How would decision makers respond when you're in the kind of event that you were in and people didn't have water? Because I think people pretty quickly fall back from the commodity position to let's figure out how to get these people some water, right? So I think that we all listen, it's a human necessity. We think it is a human right. I mean, I don't know how you could rob someone of the ability to get water every day, because they wouldn't last very long, as we know. So there's a certain, I bring this up because we're at a point where we've been dealing with these chronic problems for a long, long time. And we've been managing your charts. You could take a whole number of metrics and see that horrible downward trend, and we have done a good job of kind of dealing with the chronic problems we're dealing. But as we get these more acute problems, where wildfires are taking out the power grid, we've got a law in California, the Public Safety Power Shutoff Law, that if it appears that a wildfire might start, you have to shut down the transmission lines. That's not really good for water utilities. And so when we did the energy sustainability plan for Metropolitan, we had a lot of money in there for batteries and solar panels. Well, they've been putting up solar panels for a long time because that was always a good thing to do. But they were now realizing we don't have a dependable grid. And we need batteries to keep things running. So it just seems to me there are tipping points here where we need to have some preparedness built into our thinking relative to the acute crises we're going to see in water repeating themselves. This is the 1,000-year flood problem. It's like, well, but not here. You know, I mean, I know it's happening everywhere else, but it won't be here until it is here. And then maybe you wish we had been more prepared. So I'm not saying we shouldn't do all these things. We should, and we're doing. What I like about what you had to say is there's a ton of things we can do. I mean, you could be so optimistic about our ability to deal with the chronic problem, but we can't think that we can lose the power grid and still do anything. So this interdependency, I think, is something we've got to recognize. And even agriculture, I mean, agriculture is not, policy decisions get made as to where recycled water goes, just as you said. And in some places it goes to agriculture, in other places it doesn't. And that's a potential crisis. So I know I sound like I just want everyone's hair to be on fire. I burned mine off a long time ago. But I don't want to change anything, all the good things we're doing, but it does seem like we should be more prepared for the kinds of circumstances that you were dealing with earlier this winter. So I'm going to ask both of you, since you're both here, did we learn any lessons from that? Would you do anything differently?
Let's start with what Avin and Israel has done in the past. They made decisions. That's the main difference, I guess, because we're living on the same latitude, you know, of the Chihuahuan Desert, the Sonoran Desert, the Gobi Desert, the Sahara, the right. Israeli, the whatever. I mean, we're on that latitude. But we didn't make the decisions that Israel did in terms of managing the water, recycling water. And so that's one thing. That's some policy right there. The other one, the system interlinkage, I mean, let's get a real example here. What happened with Texas got all their pipelines shut down because of the weather this past February.
Right.
Guess what? The whole Chihuahua state end up without water because we didn't have any electricity, because we didn't have the gas that we were bringing from Texas to light up our systems. So we were dealing like a week to come back to all of our systems are pumping and to get water. I mean, just
Did you
that's a
see
real
that?
thing.
Did you see that as a electricity problem or a water problem? Was that a water problem or electricity problem?
Or a policy problem because we were planning to have solar power in Chihuahua because we saw the map too of the solar potential.
Let me tell you about this
Please do.
emergency things. The solution starts from having containers and trucks that are all the time. The containers are filled with water, which is changing, but you should have enough capacity there for emergency, and this is the way you plan. I think this is even thing that I teach for bachelors in engineering, yes, and you have to provide enough water and you decide for how many days you need it. Then you have trucks available to do that, but furthermore, in Israel, they develop like plastic bags, little plastic bags that when they fall, they are very, very little. But it can contain a lot of water. And people can go when something like this starts and fill them up and take it home easily and reuse it later on. So there is a special authority to deal with emergency situations. And they are taking care of all of these things. But on the national level, maybe if you want to show my last slide, I can.
We have about 10 minutes left, and so I know we wanted Donovan to also talk about San Antonio and that, and then we'll open it up to a question. So
1 minute
Avner, and then Avner, then Donovan, and then we'll open it up for one question.
Thank you. Yeah, I will not go there. And what you can see is that there is a blue line there. Oh, it fell. Okay, but I know it by heart. There's a blue line there that is the national water carrier that goes, and it used to go from north to south, take water from Lake of Galilee, from wells and so forth. But on the left side, you can see that we built large desalination plants. And actually today, 60% of the drinking water comes from the sea in Israel. But they had to change the direction of the flow in the main national water carrier because the center of the water production is now down there in the south. And it's working. Now on the left hand, you were talking about delivering water across the border, like Israel is delivering water to the Kingdom of Jordan from the Lake of Galilee. And down there, you can see there is the World Bank is going hopefully to finance a line between the Red Sea and the Dead Sea, because the Dead Sea is shrinking and Jordan doesn't have water at all. They get twice a week in Amman water only. And there will be the desalination plant. We will provide water both to Jordan and to the south of Israel. So, I mean, there is no end to ways that you can solve. But one thing, and I will finish with that, what I will say here, innovation, it was mentioned, innovation is not a target. Innovation is a mean. Technology is not a target, technology is a mean. And this is very important to think about. And I can get some support from what Elon Musk said. I saw it on ABC here a couple of days ago. He was saying, they asked him, what about those failures in the autonomic cars, you know? And he said, when you turn your car on, it does not mean that you turn your brain off. This is what
Okay, we'll give Donovan the last word. So the question is, did we learn any lessons from the events that you could share with us? Because it's great if we could merge the confidence we've got in the technologies that are available to us and some confidence that we're prepared to deal with the consequences when they fail.
Well, I've got a 30-minute answer to it, but I'll sum it up in 30 seconds. So, learned a whole lot. I'll tell you, there was a whole lot of stuff that we learned, and just that energy-water nexus was never clearer than it was in February of this year to us, the water utilities. The answers to it are gonna take some time. There are gonna be lots. Every water utility is entirely different. You have San Antonio is about 1,400 feet of elevation difference with a whole lot of disconnected systems. You're going to have to put all those together. They're somewhat together. The legislature actually created a legislation that said that all water utilities have to ensure 20 psi to all their customers during an extended power outage. We're going through that discussion. The only thing I will add to it is to say that it is going to the answers are going to be expensive. And again, it gets back to the decision making. We talk about water as a human right. It ultimately goes down to somebody has to pay for this. And those are going to make for very difficult decisions amongst the planners, the decision makers, and just, you know, if you get into the individuals out there that are going to have to support these kinds of programs. For us, if we put generators throughout our entire system to move hundreds of millions of gallons of water every day, we're talking on the order of $200, $300 million and years and years and years to put those kinds of things in place. So a whole lot of solutions are going to have to go into it. A whole lot of discussions are going to have to happen. I know Commissioner Ginecca and his team over the TCEQ is dealing with it a lot, and we're talking to them a whole lot right now. So there are a whole lot of decisions and a whole lot of discussions that are happening, but it is going to cost a lot of money to handle some of the lessons learned from the resiliency issues that we will have to address going forward.
Okay,
Time for one question?
that's up to you.
Yeah, there is. Is there any questions from the audience? Please.
Great exposition. I have a question. We see in the houses fiscal benefits for approach the solar in electricity, and I see a difference in between Israel and United States because Israel invests in take the most of the water, and the one thing we have is waste water. And we can save water in the WC, in the shower to put the weather that we can feel comfortable. But I think the people has a very low price to pay. And I don't see fiscal benefits, and probably the bank can put a project in order all the house people, all the house, I don't know how to say, people can see the water for important issue better than electricity by solar. Thank you.
I'll take that. I'll consider that more of a comment than a question. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Unless did you?
Well, I will say that that is certainly the cost benefit analysis of conservation is something we deal with on a daily basis. You have to make sure that if we're spending money, we're getting a benefit for it. And we have to go through those analysis, not just from, again, a green feel good kind of thing. We have to go through it from a financial analysis portion. The other thing I would say in terms of banks and rating agencies, they are looking at this a whole lot more and making sure that those kinds of programs fit into the resiliency of your overall water system. So those are the very critical issues, and I would say that we're looking at them.
Go ahead, Eduardo.
I don't want to expand the panel too much, just a comment. I'm Eduardo Cabrera, and I think that a topic that is underestimated in the holistic water cycle is the distribution network. Some cities, at least in Mexico, has a lot of losses. but it's an interesting measure to take into account, no, to invest in the distribution networks. Thank you.
I could say a word about that. Technology is helping us a lot if we approach the problem not from replacing pipes, but just controlling the pressure to minimize losses. And that's serving us well. We're using that, and I know it's a technology that is being used, and also provides you with some opportunities to move into smart water management. And I think that's the way to go. You have a problem, then throw some technology. It's a mean. Throw some technology at it, and then you fix it. You save some water. You save some money. And you can move into solve other problems.
Perfect. Well, let's give the panel a round of applause, please.
Give you all a round of applause.
We'll do part 2 now.
Yeah. Second round. Take a panel photo. Thank you very much. On behalf of Calixto Mateos, John Beckham, Salvador Lopez, the bank's managing team, we want to thank you for participating and allowing us, the bank, to have the Border Environmental Forum. Thank you to our keynote speakers, panelists, and of course each of you for being here in the audience today. We had an incredible dialogue on several different topics like USMCA, investment opportunities in water, mobility, urban development, as well as air quality. It is our hope that this dialogue will continue to spark a major push in infrastructure investment that will benefit the border region while fighting climate change. I would also like to take a moment before we end to thank our sponsors once again. If we can throw the slide up with the sponsors, please. I'd like to thank Baker McKenzie, Cacho, Cavazos and Newton, Holland and Knight, Baywa, Rick Mueller, IBC Bank, the Canadian Consulate, Avisa Partners, Grupo Gestión, and GEMCO. Without their financial support, this would not have been able to take place. So thank you. And my final thank you goes to the bank staff and consultants who helped put in a lot of hours, heavy lifting, the IT folks, public affairs, my department, Estela, Isela. Thank you, Gustavo. Thank you to all of you for your participation. This concludes and adjourns the 25th Annual Border Environmental Forum, and we look forward to seeing you next year at the 26th Annual. Thank you for joining us.